1. My wife and I live in a condo in a nicer part of our town. Not Beverly Hills or anything, but nice, quiet, and safe. We have neighbors that are the exact opposite of that. They are rude, loud, and unsafe. When they first moved in, I was nice to them, would say hi, offer to help carry things if I saw them carrying lots of things and corralling kids. They live one door down in the upstairs unit. I tried to be welcoming, but also wasn't super pushy about it. I wasn't the neighbor that would go door to door and say welcome. But if I saw you in the parking lot, I'd say hi, and if we knew each other, we'd chat. Anyway, I've always been nothing but polite to these people, and they've been nothing but rude. Flipped me off when I say hi, yelled at me when I stopped a ball their son dropped from going into the parking lot, all sorts of stuff. So after a while, I gave up on trying to be friendly. I wouldn't be rude, but I wouldn't greet them or go out of my way to help them. Turns out they're rude to everyone. My next-door neighbor, who is a kind, gay old man, one asked them to pick up trash they dropped in front of his door, at which they called him racist and used a slur for gay people. They have kicked my pumpkin every year and ripped my Christmas lights off and cut my inflatable decorations that I put in the area in front of my door. That pushed me over the edge. Don't touch my decorations. These people are real pieces of garbage. On to the revenge. 2 months ago, I came out onto my car and there was a glob of caulk or paint smeared over a small section of my back window. I had to scrape it off and clean it, making me late to work. When I got home, a neighbor stopped me and said their cameras caught the rude neighbor smearing something on my car. I figured as much, but now I have proof. So I waited and planned. I walked about the complex frequently, taking note of who had cameras and where they faced, determined their blind spots and what path to take to avoid being seen. I waited until last night, when they parked the car out of sight of any units with cameras and went out at 1:30 a.m. to exact my revenge. I went to their car and let out the air from their tires, not fully flat, but enough to notice and not be safe to drive. At least over half empty. Then, after the tires were flattened, I put their valve caps back on, but added a special surprise, liquid nails. Not a ton. You can't really see it when you walk by, but enough that you'd never get those caps off without ruining the stems. I considered putting some in their lug nuts, but decided that was too far. I left for work before they got out, but a neighbor stopped me on my way to my door after work and said they tried to get the caps off and fill their tires but couldn't. So they had to call a tow for their car and then get an Uber to get everyone to school and work. Today was our last day before we moved into our new house, so I'll never see them again. I've never left our condo complex feeling happier than today, knowing I'll be rid of these asshats. 2. So I work at an escape room. We have set times for each room because they run for 60 minutes, and we need at least 15 between to reset, get waivers filled out, and read the rules to the next group going in. There are only 5 rooms total at our location, and there are days we have every single one running at the same time, even though start times are staggered. Start times are available online, and we take reservations through the website and over the phone. If you've played with us before, you know all of this, and if you've done multiple escape room experiences, you would think you'd be more considerate of the workers and other patrons. Now we have a policy. If you arrive over 10 minutes past your scheduled start time, you can either play with the docked time, however late you were subtracted from the hour, or reschedule to a different room or a different time and day. We're very generous with this policy, and if we don't have the same room scheduled right after your time slot, we have even been known to give players back their time because, why not? It's just good customer service, and we want people to have a good time. However, there have been a few times where the group has been so disrespectful that I do not, in fact, give them back their time, even if we're dead slow. One instance happened 2 weeks ago. A group was late, so I called them and told them about our policy of subtracting time. I was told in a rude tone, "We're only 2 minutes away," and then hung up on. 9 minutes later, this group of teenagers ambles in. I direct them to the waivers, they take their time using the restrooms. By now I already know I would be docking their time, and had already warned them I was going to do so. But they either didn't think I was serious or hadn't been paying attention. I went over the rules and stumbled over my words at one point. They snickered and smirked. I decided in that moment, even though we were slow and had no other bookings, I was taking their full time away, which by that point was roughly 25 minutes. I started them, and then began subtracting a minute or two every time they looked away from their clocks, until their timers would run out exactly at the time they would have if they had shown up on time, giving them roughly 35 minutes of playtime instead of 60. They were actually really good at the room, zooming through most of the puzzles without any help. They were on the last puzzle when time ran out, and probably would have set a record if they'd had full time. I went to get them, as cheery as anyone would, saying a mouthful, "Too bad, you were so close." Well, I found out in that moment that they had beaten all of our other escape rooms so far except this one. They were cursing at each other, saying they were super pissed and depressed they couldn't get out because this was one of our easier rooms overall. No one said anything about their time, so I assumed they really did completely disregard my original warning, and I wasn't about to remind them they were playing with a severe time penalty anyway. Too bad, so sad though. If they'd been to us before, they could have told me so I didn't go through all the rules again, at least. It would have saved them some time, but looking back, it seems like they were just being haughty. 3. Important information. The hospital is powered by volunteers because it's a non-profit. Without them, the operation power gets cut in half. Story. It was 2020, and the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia. Yuyud was a volunteer at the local hospital, and he was respected by the staff and volunteers alike for his friendly demeanor, calm temperament, and willingness to help anyone in need. He was the designated toxic handler, the person everyone went to when they needed to rant about something no matter how small. One day a new supervisor, Boss Asu, arrived at the hospital. He was from a different province and he hated volunteers with a passion. As soon as he arrived, he began degrading the volunteers and chewing them out for even the smallest infractions, such as wearing t-shirts and jeans instead of the regulation uniforms, even though the volunteers' uniform was only a red vest with their logo on it. Yuyud and the other volunteers were furious and confused. They didn't understand why Boss Asu was so hostile towards them. They were the ones doing all the hard work, keeping the hospital running smoothly. One day, Boss Asu saw Yuyud working on a broken computer in the staff office. He flew into a rage and yelled, "Who let you up here? Get outside and do your volunteer stuff." Yuyud was furious. He went to the break room and told the other volunteers what had happened. Everyone was outraged. In the next week, 7 of the 13 volunteers quit. The remaining volunteers stopped doing all the extra things they had been doing, such as bringing lunch for the staff and checking the fleet of vehicles regularly. They also refused to fix any problems that weren't specifically listed in their job descriptions. Even did only half the paperwork because the job description stated that the EMS needed to fill in the latter half, making work a lot longer to be done. When the hospital manager noticed that the volunteers were gone and expenses were up, he called an emergency meeting. Boss Asu blamed the volunteers and Yuyud, but Yuyud had a surprise for him. He had a recording of him yelling at the volunteers and mocking them. Remember, toxic handler. He used his influence to secure the recording. The fallout. The manager was furious. He confronted Boss Asu, who tried to deny everything, but the video evidence was undeniable. He was demoted to staff, and it destroyed his reputation. With his reputation ruined and unable to be promoted to a higher position, if he quits, there will be a paper trail about his discrimination. 4. Many years ago, I used to work for an SMB managed service provider as a repair technician in London. I was repairing desktops, laptops, and printers. It's pointless trying to drive in central London, so the company would reimburse us for our monthly public transport ticket. As a result of this, we couldn't really carry spare parts with us like the guys with company cars elsewhere in the country, so they would get delivered to site. The usual routine was go to the office in the morning and collect the parts for the first call, then ask the store's clerk to arrange delivery for the rest of my day's calls to site in a set order. This would be the order that I had already planned to attend to travel for the day, so the parts would get there before me, and I could crack on with the first one while they were being delivered. I'd usually be on site for the first one by 9:30 a.m. and would regularly manage 6 or 7 repairs per day. Obviously, this would depend on how much travel was involved, but all the techs would divvy up the calls first thing in the morning so that none of us were running around the city too much, and we were mostly based around one area for the day. We each had regular clients where we'd often go 2 or 3 times per week and knew the IT teams involved. Anyway, the MSP gets bought by a bigger MSP, we're told not to worry. I know, right? And that nothing would be changing, as we were one of the most productive regions in the business, and for a bit it was everything as normal. Then the manager announces that he's leaving. I bumped into him about a year later at random. He said that this was due to politics. A new Golden Boy manager is parachuted in from up north to transform us. Apparently we might be the most productive team, but we weren't the most profitable. He devises several methods to decrease costs and raise profitability. First off is the closure of the office and relocation of the stores to somewhere central. This is basically to the other end of the country, so shipping has to be done the night before. Us techs are none too happy about this. Second, he wants us to use cars, our own cars. He can't force this, as the travel ticket is written into our contracts, and he can only change the contract with our agreement. To a man, we say no. What he can do is change the shipping routine. The new process is that parts will be delivered to a commercial locker at locations in the city, and we have to go pick up the parts before heading to our first call. Cue malicious compliance. We were well aware of the new owner's chosen shipping company, and usually reserve them the nickname UK Fail, as they never seem to hit service level agreement. Further, the lockers are located in various strange locations. On the street, petrol stations, random courier offices, kind of like how Amazon lockers are now, but without the nice paint jobs or electronic entry. They have no way to keep tabs on who is there or collecting what aside from calling us. Anyway, there's a quick get-together and we agree that, as the Golden Boy hasn't deigned to help us and isn't hiring replacements for those who left, we aren't obligated to help him. The plan is, no one is to attend a locker until 10:30, which is the SLA for parts delivery. No one is to carry more than 1 bag of parts. If you have to do multiple trips to a locker, so be it. No one is to pick up any slack for anyone else. Answer calls if someone is in trouble, though. Do what you have been assigned if possible, and never call in to say you have finished all your calls for the day. Anything that gets left over gets left. If you get assigned an emergency call, some clients had SLAs that required a tech on site in a given time, usually 4 hours. Go there and wait for parts as usual. Communicate this to any new hires during their training days. Productivity plummets. Golden Boy calls meetings and generally loses it. But hey, we're just following his procedure, right? Within 12 months, Golden Boy was gone, and the new guy has the sense to ask us what would be a better way to run things. 5. At my most recent former employer, a home improvement store in the vein of Lowe's or Home Depot, I worked in receiving, mostly unloading trucks with a forklift. About 2 years into my time there, we got a new assistant store manager, Gary. This guy came in and thought that not only did his shit not stink, but that we should all eat as much of it as possible. Micromanaging, changing SOP, etc. Everything he said was right. So one day, a truck's in the process of backing down the ramp to our receiving docks. But there's a problem with the brakes, and the wheels are just dragging. Since my job at that moment is wait until the truck comes in and unload it once it does, there's literally nothing I can really do, apart from give the dude good vibes from my seat. To be clear, the problem was not any failing on the driver's part, just bad luck with the hoses. At this time of day, we have 2 people on the clock in receiving, me on the forklift waiting for the truck, and my department manager on the other. Helping out in the outside yard because 2 propane forklifts were disabled, and they had 2 lumber trucks show up at the same time. We only had 2 electric forks, and they were the only ones that could be inside the building. So basically, I am literally all alone on the only available forklift that can unload the truck, which is fine, because that's my fucking jam. At the same time, we only had 1 dock of 3 available for live loads, because one already had an unhooked trailer and the other was broken. So while we're understaffed and short equipment, and while the driver is trying to unfuck his truck, Gary walks into receiving with the 2 other department managers and sees me sitting on the forklift, basically just twiddling my thumbs as I watch the driver. I can understand how it might look like I'm slacking off since I kind of am, but not really. "Why are you just sitting there?" Gary asks me. "Waiting for the truck to back up," I say. "While you're waiting, you can do other things." I look out the dock door and see the driver come from between the truck and trailer and get back in the cab. So I say, "Buddy's almost got it. He'll be docked in like a minute." "And in that minute, you can do other things." I've had more than my share of shitty leaders in my life, and I can tell by Gary's tone and body language that nothing is going to shake him from this attitude, so I just say, "You got it. What should I do while I wait?" "Go outside and help unload one of the lumber trucks." "For how long?" Sounding annoyed, he waves his hands in a shooing motion and says, "For as long as it takes, now go." Then he walks away. The 2 department managers look at each other, look at me, smile, and follow after him. They know what's about to happen. "Hey, buddy, you got it. I'm absolutely going to do this for you." So I spin the forklift around and zip out through the big overhead door into the outside yard to help with the lumber trucks. As I do this, I hear the trailer back into the dock. But that doesn't matter because Gary gave me a mission. I make it to where the lumber trucks are parked in the yard, and my department manager drives over next to me. He says, "Why are you out here? Isn't the truck docking?" I nod. Gary told me I needed to be out here helping while I wait. He was very insistent. My manager just smiles, turns around, and continues to unload. I start helping. A stack of studs here, a bundle of trussels there, and I'm doing my part to empty these flatbeds of wood. While this is happening, I hear the gate attendant for the outside yard radio that we have another truck waiting to come in. I radio back that it's going to have to wait until the other truck is gone. Then another truck shows up, and another. In the 20 minutes I've been outside, 4 trucks besides the one that's now on the dock arrived to be unloaded in our single dock. And every time I tell the gate that they will have to wait. At this point, the general store manager, Mike, finally hears what's happening over the radio and cuts in. "Hey, what's going on? Are we not unloading the truck and receiving?" I radio back and say, "I'll be there in just a second." I put the load I've got on my tires where it needs to go and haul ass back to receiving. As I arrive in the bay, Mike and Gary are both standing there with the driver next to them. I zip up to them and hold my hand out for the driver's paperwork. He hands it to me, and Gary says, "What the hell is taking you so long? Why haven't you started unloading yet?" "You told me to help on the lumber trucks while I wait," I say. He sputters and says, "I meant until this truck was in the dock." I look at Mike and then back to Gary. "I asked you for how long, and you said for as long as it takes." "I didn't say that." I look at him and he looks at me like he's daring me. And I like taking dares. I name the 2 department managers who were there with him when he told me and say, "We all heard you say it, you were very clear." His face turns the color of an apple, and not like a Fuji or Gala, but a red fucking delicious. He opens his mouth, but Mike puts his hand on his arm and stops him. Mike looks at me and says, "Get it sorted fast, okay?" I nod and get started as Mike walks away with Gary fuming beside him. Now, I didn't hear their conversation because I was kicking ass and taking names on my forklift. But word got back to me that Mike told Gary he would never again be allowed to question anything anyone in receiving does, and especially me when it comes to unloading trucks. If I'm on a forklift, I'm basically untouchable. And over the next year that Gary was with us, he abided by that directive, though he did feel entitled to shoot me a dirty glance, or 20, every so often. Not that I cared, because I had trucks to unload. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 315. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, I would appreciate it if you hit the like button. It lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video and encourages them to recommend it to other people, which means more people watch it, then they recommend it to other people, and I become the king of YouTube. Actually, that would be a terrible thing, but I would like more people to watch the videos. If you'd like to get early access to the videos, then you can support me on my Patreon, which is linked in the description. That's just Hellfreezer on Patreon. And you'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store. Haven't updated that in a little bit. I will when I have time, but the designs we have up there are still absolutely fantabulous, if I do say so myself. And you can also make donations during streams or videos like this one by clicking that little heart with a $sign in the middle there. And while you don't have to do this, I very much appreciate it, and thank you kindly to everyone who has done so in the past. Whereas no shoutouts on this video, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, how cold does it have to get before you say to yourself, "Oh goodness, that's cold"? I ask this because tonight's probably the first night, although it's definitely been quite cold for a while and I've been getting quite annoyed with it. I've generally found ways of keeping myself warm while I work, but tonight was the first night I had to grab the space heater from the living room and move it up to the office to have it on in between stories to warm the office. And it is doing its job, thankfully. And today was between -1 and -2 degrees Celsius. Obviously fluctuates a little bit as time goes on, but it was -1 when I last checked. So let me know what you think in a comment below. How cold does it have to be before you consider it cold? And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.